You're being mean, and mean people don't deserve respect. The entire private dining room in the Jiang family estate went dead silent. 6-year-old Alexander stood at the elegant table, his small hands gripping the edge as he stared directly at the woman they called the Ice Empress of Seoul's underworld. His mother, Loveth, had gone completely pale beside him, her fork frozen halfway to her mouth. "You don't talk to my mommy like that," he said, his voice trembling but fierce. Men twice Madame Jiang Soo-jin's size bowed when she entered a room. Her own son, Min-ho, the most feared mafia boss in Korea, obeyed her every word without question. Politicians trembled at her phone calls. Rival crime families had learned the hard way what happened when you disrespected her. But this black child, this boy who'd walked into her home just 2 hours ago, holding his mother's hand, was standing there with tears streaming down his brown cheeks, calling her mean, every security guard positioned. Around the room stopped breathing. Nobody knew what happened when someone talked back to Madame Jiang and lived to tell about it. "Alexander," Loveth whispered desperately, reaching for her son's arm. "Baby, please." "No, Mommy." Alexander's voice cracked as more tears fell. "She said mean things about you. She said you don't belong here. That's not nice." Madame Jiang sat perfectly still at the head of the table, her sharp eyes fixed on the child. She was dressed in an elegant hanbok, her silver hair pulled back in a tight bun. Everything about her screamed power, control, danger. Her expression hadn't changed. She simply stared at this small boy who'd just done what no one had dared do in 30 years. But Alexander didn't sit. He stood there, fists clenched at his sides, waiting for an apology his mother would never get. Min-ho finally found his voice, his hand gripping his wine glass so hard his knuckles went white. "Mother." She raised one finger. He stopped mid-sentence. "If you're wondering how a fearless 6-year-old became the first person to ever challenge Korea's most ruthless mafia queen, then buckle up. Drop a comment below if you're ready for this story, because what this boy just did is about to change 3 lives forever. Hit that subscribe button right now because this story is about to get wild." 3 hours earlier, Loveth had been standing in her tiny bathroom, staring at her reflection and questioning all her life choices. "Mommy, you've changed your earrings 3 times, Alexander said from where he sat on the toilet lid, swinging his legs. "Are you nervous?" "What gave it away?" Loveth muttered, switching from gold hoops to silver studs and then back to gold again. "You're doing that thing where you talk to yourself in the mirror," Alexander said matter-of-factly, "and you said a bad word earlier." "I did not," Loveth caught herself. "Okay, I did. Don't repeat it." "I won't, but Mr. Min-ho says bad words all the time, when he thinks I'm not listening." Loveth paused, looking at her son's reflection. "Does he now?" "Yep. Last week when his car wouldn't start, he said, 'Don't tell me,'" Loveth said quickly. "I don't want to know." She turned to face Alexander, smoothing down the front of her navy dress for the 100th time. Her son looked adorable in the little suit Min-ho had bought him, complete with a bow tie that he kept trying to loosen. "Stop touching your tie," Loveth said automatically. "It's choking me." "It's not choking you. You just don't like it." "Same thing," Alexander grumbled, but he dropped his hands. Loveth knelt down to his level, taking his small face in her hands. "Listen, baby, tonight is really important. Mr. Min-ho's mother she's very traditional, very proper. We need to be on our absolute best behavior." "I know," Alexander said, rolling his eyes. "You've told me like 1,000,000 times." "I'm serious, Alexander. This woman," Loveth stopped, choosing her words carefully. "She might not be very nice, but we're going to be polite anyway, okay? Even if she's mean? Especially if she's mean. We kill them with kindness, remember?" Alexander nodded solemnly, then brightened. "Can we get ice cream after?" "You always say I deserve ice cream when I have to do hard things." Loveth laughed despite her nerves. "Yes, baby. After this, you can have all the ice cream you want." 20 minutes later, they were in the back of Min-ho's Mercedes, gliding through Seoul's nighttime traffic towards certain doom. Okay, maybe not certain doom, but it definitely felt like it. Min-ho kept glancing at her through the rearview mirror, his expression tight. "You okay?" "Peachy," Loveth lied. "You don't look peachy. You look like you're about to throw up." "That's because I might throw up." Alexander perked up from where he was watching the city lights. "If Mommy throws up, can we go home?" Nobody's throwing up, Minho said firmly. And Loveth, I meant what I said. I'll be right there. My mother can be difficult, but I won't let her hurt you. Famous last words. The Jang estate looked like something out of a period drama, all traditional Korean architecture and perfectly manicured gardens, surrounded by walls that screamed, "We have money and security systems that could track a mosquito." The guards at the gate had checked Minho's car with the kind of thoroughness usually reserved for visiting heads of state. "This is where you live?" Alexander asked, his eyes wide as they pulled up to the main house. "I grew up here," Minho said, "but I don't live here anymore." "Why not? It's so cool." Minho's jaw tightened. "It's complicated, buddy." Inside, the house was even more intimidating. Everything was pristine, expensive, and completely devoid of warmth. The staff moved like ghosts, appearing and disappearing without making a sound. Loveth felt like she was in a museum where breathing too loud might set off an alarm. Madame Yang was waiting in the formal dining room, and the moment Loveth laid eyes on her, she understood why grown men were terrified of this woman. She sat at the head of a table that could seat a small army, her posture so perfect it made Loveth's back hurt just looking at her. Everything about her radiated cold, calculated power. "Mother," Minho said, his hand firm on Loveth's lower back. "This is Loveth Bryan, my fiancé, and this is Alexander." Alexander bowed exactly the way Minho had taught him, his little body bending forward with surprising grace. "Hello, Mrs. Jang. Thank you for having us for dinner." For a long moment, Madame Jang just stared at the boy like he was something unpleasant she'd found on the bottom of her shoe. Then her eyes moved to Loveth, and the temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. "So," she said in perfect, crisp English, "this is the woman my son has chosen to embarrass our family with." Loveth felt Minho go rigid beside her. Mother. And her child. Madame Jang's gaze slid back to Alexander with obvious distaste. How quaint. Oh, this was going to be a long night. They sat down to what could only be described as a torture session disguised as a meal. Course after course appeared, each one more elaborate than the last, and Madame Yang used the time between dishes to systematically dismantle everything about Loveth's life. "So, Miss Bryan," she began, delicately lifting a piece of fish with her chopsticks. "Minho tells me you work in hospitality?" "Yes, ma'am. I'm the guest relations manager at the Grand Hyatt." "How practical." The word dripped with condescension. "I suppose someone has to deal with difficult tourists." Loveth forced a smile. "I enjoy helping people." "I'm sure you do." Madame Yang took a sip of water. "And Alexander's father? I assume he's involved in the child's life?" The air went out of Loveth's lungs. "He passed away 2 years ago." "I see. How unfortunate." But Madame Jang's tone suggested she thought it was more convenient than unfortunate. "And you came to Korea because—" "I wanted a fresh start, a new beginning for me and my son." "How brave," Madame Jang said, in a tone that clearly meant foolish. "To come to a country where you don't speak the language, don't understand the culture, and hope to what? Find a wealthy man to take care of you?" Minho's chopsticks clattered against his plate. "That's enough." "Is it?" Madame Jang raised an eyebrow. "I'm simply trying to understand what brings a single mother to a foreign country where she doesn't speak the language, doesn't understand the culture, and somehow manages to catch the attention of my son." The implication was crystal clear. Gold digger, user, opportunist. Loveth felt heat rising in her chest, but she kept her voice level. "I came to Korea because I got a job offer, a good one. I wanted to give Alexander opportunities, expose him to different cultures, show him that the world is bigger than one small town." "How noble," Madame Jang said, not sounding like she thought it was noble at all. "And you expect me to believe that meeting Minho was simply coincidence?" "Believe whatever you want," Loveth said, her patience starting to fray. "The truth is, the truth whether you believe it or not." Madame Jang's eyes narrowed. "The truth is that you're a divorced single mother." "Widowed," Loveth corrected sharply, "who saw an opportunity and took it. My son is one of the most powerful men in Seoul. Of course you'd want to secure him for yourself and your child." Alexander's head popped up from his plate. "Mr. Minho wanted to be with us. He asked Mommy out first." "Alexander," Loveth said gently, putting a hand on his arm, "eat your dinner, baby." but Madame Yang was looking at Alexander now with something like curiosity mixed with contempt. You call him Mr. Min-ho. How formal, almost as if he's not really family. He's my friend, Alexander said, his chin lifting defiantly. And he makes my mommy happy. Does he? Because from where I'm sitting, your mother looks quite uncomfortable, almost as if she knows she doesn't belong here. That's when Min-ho stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Every person in the room, staff, guards, everyone, went completely still. I said that's enough. His voice carried the kind of authority that made Loveth's skin prickle. This wasn't the Min-ho who bought Alexander ice cream and watched cartoons on her couch. This was the man who ran one of Seoul's most feared organizations. Madame Jang looked up at her son with raised eyebrows. Sit down, Min-ho. You're being dramatic. No, you're being cruel. Min-ho's hands were clenched at his sides. Loveth came here tonight as my guest, as my fiancé, and you've done nothing but insult her from the moment she walked through that door. I'm simply being honest. You're being mean. Alexander suddenly shouted, and then he was standing too, his little hands gripping the edge of the table, tears streaming down his face. You're saying mean things about my mommy, and that's not okay. The silence that followed was so complete, Loveth could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. Madame Yang stared at Alexander, her expression shifting from shock to something Loveth couldn't quite read. No one moved. No one breathed. Alexander, Loveth whispered, reaching for him. Baby! But Alexander shook her off, his voice breaking as he continued. My mommy is the best person in the whole world. She works really hard, and she takes care of me, and she's nice to everyone even when they're mean to her. And Mr. Min-ho loves us, and we love him, and you're just being mean, and mean people don't deserve respect. Then he burst into sobs, and Loveth pulled him into her arms, her own eyes burning with tears. Min-ho's voice, when he spoke, was deadly quiet. He turned to his security detail. Leave us, all of you, now. The men hesitated for exactly 1 second before filing out. When the door closed behind them, Min-ho looked at his mother with an expression Loveth had never seen before. Not anger, but something colder. Disappointment. For 30 years, people have been afraid to tell you the truth, Min-ho said. They bow and scrape and let you say whatever you want because you're powerful, because you're dangerous. But this child, this 6-year-old boy, just taught you something every person in your organization should have said years ago. Being powerful doesn't give you the right to be cruel. Madame Jang's face had gone white, then red. How dare you? No, mother. How dare you? Min-ho's voice cut through hers like steel. Loveth is the woman I love. She's the woman I'm going to marry, and Alexander is going to be my son. If you can't accept that, if you can't treat them with the respect they deserve, then you're not welcome in our lives. The silence that followed was deafening. Loveth sat frozen, her hand gripping Alexander's so tight she was probably hurting him. She'd never expected this, never expected Min-ho to choose them so publicly, so completely. Madame Yang's face had gone pale. The worst part is that I brought them here hoping, stupidly, foolishly hoping, that you might see what I see. That Loveth is strong and brilliant and the best thing that's ever happened to me. That Alexander is brave and kind and already more of a man than most people in our organization. But instead, you treated them like they're beneath you. He walked over to where Loveth sat holding Alexander, and he crouched down, taking the boy's tear-streaked face in his hands, pulling the boy into a tight hug. You, he said, his voice rough, are the bravest person I know. Alexander sniffled against Min-ho's shoulder. I didn't like how she talked to Mommy. I didn't like it either, Min-ho said, and you did exactly the right thing by standing up. For her. Loveth felt tears streaming down her own face now. Min-ho stood and helped Loveth to her feet, keeping one hand on Alexander's shoulder. Then he looked at his mother one last time. We're leaving, and we're not coming back until you're ready to apologize. Not to me, to them. They walked out of that mansion without looking back, Alexander holding both their hands and still sniffling occasionally. As they drove away, Loveth watched the estate disappear in the rearview mirror and wondered if she'd just witnessed the end of Min-ho's relationship with his mother, or possibly the end of her relationship with Min-ho. The next morning, Loveth woke up to her phone buzzing with messages. She grabbed it groggily, squinting at the screen. Min-ho. I'm outside. I brought coffee and pastries. Can we talk? She looked at the time, 7 a.m. The man was nothing if not persistent. She threw on a robe and opened the door to find Minho standing there looking like he hadn't slept at all, holding a cardboard carrier with coffee cups and a bag from her favorite bakery. You look terrible, she said. I feel terrible. He held up the coffee. Peace offering? She sighed and stepped aside to let him in. They sat on her tiny balcony, Seoul waking up below them, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. I need to move you and Alexander, Minho said finally. Loveth's coffee cup stopped halfway to her mouth. Excuse me? My mother knows about you now, which means everyone in my world knows about you. He ran a hand through his already messy hair. And I have enemies, Loveth, people who would love nothing more than to find a weakness they could exploit. And we're your weakness, Loveth said flatly. You're everything, Minho corrected, his dark eyes intense, which makes you valuable, which makes you a target. Loveth set down her coffee cup, her hands suddenly shaking. So what are you saying? That loving you comes with a price tag? That Alexander and I have to live in fear because of who you are? I'm saying I want you somewhere I can protect you. My penthouse in Hanam-dong has security, safe rooms, everything you'd need. I don't want to need those things. Loveth's voice rose. I don't want my son growing up in a fortress. I don't want armed guards and panic rooms and... She stopped, tears burning her eyes. I don't want this, Minho. The words hung between them like a blade. You don't want me, Minho said quietly. It wasn't a question. I don't want this life, Loveth clarified, but her voice was shaking. Your mother called my son baggage. She implied I'm a gold digger. And now you're telling me we need to go into hiding because loving you puts us in danger? How is any of this okay? Minho's jaw tightened. It's not okay. None of it is okay. But I can't change who I am or the world I live in. All I can do is try to keep you safe. And what if I don't want to be kept? Loveth stood up, wrapping her robe tighter around herself. What if I want to be able to walk down the street without looking over my shoulder? What if I want Alexander to have a normal childhood without bodyguards and security protocols? Then you're with the wrong man, Minho said, and the defeat in his voice broke something in Loveth's chest. They stared at each other, and Loveth felt the weight of an impossible choice pressing down on her. Love Minho and accept this life, or walk away and keep the peace she'd built for herself and Alexander. I need to think, she said finally. Okay. Minho stood, and he looked like he wanted to reach for her but didn't dare. But while you're thinking, I need you to at least consider moving temporarily, just until I can handle some situations, please, Loveth. She wanted to say no, wanted to draw a line in the sand and demand he figure out his life before dragging her into it, but the fear in his eyes was real, and she knew Minho well enough to know he wouldn't ask. Unless the danger was real, too. Before Loveth could answer, they heard a small voice from the doorway. Are you making Mommy cry again? They both turned to see Alexander standing there in his pajamas, rubbing his eyes and looking suspicious. Minho smiled. Come here, buddy. Alexander patted over, and Minho lifted him onto his lap. I'm trying to convince your mom that we should all live together for a while, to keep you both safe. What do you think? Alexander looked between them seriously, then nodded. I think that's a good idea, but you have to promise to protect Mommy from mean grandmas. Minho laughed, the sound surprising all of them. I promise. Cross my heart. And you have to keep buying me ice cream, Alexander added, completely serious. Deal. Alexander looked at his mother. Mommy, can we stay with Mr. Minho, please? His house probably has cool stuff. And despite everything, despite the fear and the doubt and the impossible situation, Loveth found herself softening at her son's hopeful face. Because Alexander didn't understand the danger, didn't see the complications. He just saw someone who made his mom happy and wanted to keep them safe. She looked at Minho, then back at her son and sighed. Temporarily, she said finally, her voice firm. Just until things settle down, but this doesn't mean I've forgiven you, Minho. Minho's face flooded with relief. I understand. And I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to process or discuss or... Her voice cracked. I just need space. Can you give me that? Whatever you need, he said quietly. Alexander frowned. Does that mean you're still mad at Mr. Minho? Very mad, Loveth confirmed. So he's getting the ice treatment? Alexander asked, clearly having picked up on more than Loveth realized. Minho winced. Apparently. Not just ice treatment, Loveth corrected, looking directly at Minho. The Arctic freeze treatment. Welcome to the tundra, baby. Minho actually smiled at that, even though it didn't quite reach his eyes. Understood. What Loveth needed was time. What she got was chaos. If you're loving this story, make sure you hit that like button because you won't believe what happens when Madame Jang realizes she's met her match. And drop a comment below telling me what you would have done if you were in Loveth's shoes. They moved into Minho's penthouse 3 days later, and Loveth had to admit, begrudgingly, that it was stunning. And he has taste. Floor-to-ceiling windows with panoramic views of the Han River, modern furniture that somehow managed to look comfortable instead of sterile, and a bedroom for Alexander that made her son literally scream with excitement. Mommy, there's a bunk bed. Alexander's voice echoed through the penthouse. And a TV, and look at all this space for my toys. Minho stood in the doorway watching Alexander bounce around his new room, and the soft expression on his face made Loveth's heart hurt. But she'd made herself a promise. She would do this for Alexander's safety. She would sleep in the same room as Minho so her son wouldn't worry. But that was it. Minho was getting the full Arctic treatment until she figured out what she wanted. That night, they lay in Minho's massive bed, a king-sized monstrosity that probably cost more than Loveth's entire bedroom set back home, with what felt like the Grand Canyon between them. Loveth had changed in the bathroom, came out in her most unsexy pajamas, and climbed into bed without a word. She turned her back to Minho and closed her eyes, even though she could feel him watching her. Loveth, Minho said softly. Silence. I know you're awake. More silence. I just want you to know that I'm sleeping, Loveth said flatly. You just talked. In my sleep. Leave me alone. She heard Minho sigh in the darkness. Okay, good night, Loveth. I love you. Every fiber of her being wanted to say, I love you too. But she bit her tongue and said nothing, and after a few minutes, she heard Minho's breathing even out. She didn't sleep much that night. The silent treatment continued for days. Loveth was a master at it. She'd perfected the art of being polite but completely distant. She'd make conversation during meals for Alexander's sake, but the moment their son was out of earshot, she went back to ice-cold silence. Minho was slowly losing his mind, and honestly, Loveth was finding some satisfaction in it. On day 3, he tried flowers. A massive bouquet of roses appeared on the kitchen counter. Loveth put them in a vase without comment and walked away. Day 4, he tried jewelry. A beautiful bracelet left on her nightstand. She put it in the drawer and didn't mention it. On day 5, he tried cooking her favorite meal. She ate it, thanked him politely in front of Alexander, and then went back to her book without another word. Is Mommy still mad? Alexander asked Minho one morning while they were making breakfast. Loveth had already left for work. Very mad, Minho admitted, looking like he might actually cry into the pancake batter. What did you do? I let my mother be mean to her, and I didn't protect her the way I should have. Alexander considered this with the seriousness of a Supreme Court judge. That was bad. I know. You should say sorry. I did. She won't listen. Then you should do something big, Alexander said wisely. Mommy says actions speak louder than words. You're absolutely right. Minho looked down at this 6-year-old relationship counselor. Any ideas? Before Alexander could answer, Minho's phone rang. The caller ID made his entire body go rigid. Mother. Minho. Madame Jang's voice was sharp. I've made a decision about your little situation. If you're calling to insult Loveth again, I'm calling to inform you that I've invited Ji-hai Park to stay at your penthouse. She's arriving this afternoon. Minho's hand clenched around the phone so hard he thought it might crack. You did what? Ji-hai, your former fiancée. Surely you remember her? His mother's voice was sweet as poisoned honey. Her family has been asking about you, and I thought it would be good for you to reconnect. Perhaps remember what a proper match looks like. Mother, I am engaged. To a woman who clearly doesn't want you. Madame Jang cut in smoothly. I have eyes in that penthouse, Min-ho. She won't speak to you. She sleeps in the same bed and treats you like a stranger. Is this really the life you want? Rage exploded in Min-ho's chest. You've been spying on me? I'm protecting my son from making a catastrophic mistake. Ji-hai arrives at 2 p.m. I suggest you prepare appropriate accommodations. She hung up. Min-ho stood there, phone in hand, trying to figure out how his life had become a soap opera. Mr. Min-ho? Alexander was looking up at him with worried eyes. You look really upset. I am upset, buddy. Very, very upset. Is it the mean grandma again? Yeah, Min-ho said, running a hand through his hair. It's always the mean grandma, Min-ho muttered. That's when he heard the front door open. Loveth was home early. Apparently she'd forgotten something, and from the expression on her face when she walked into the kitchen, she'd already gotten the news. Your mother, Loveth said, her voice dangerously calm, just called my office to inform me that your ex-fiancé is moving in, today. Min-ho closed his eyes. Loveth. No. She held up a hand. I need you to explain to me right now why I shouldn't pack Alexander's things and walk out that door. Because I didn't invite her, Min-ho said desperately. My mother did this without asking me, without my permission. And are you going to tell her no? Min-ho opened his mouth and then closed it, because the truth was complicated. The Park family was powerful. Refusing Ji-hai entry would cause business complications, could destabilize alliances, create the kind of mess that... Loveth saw the hesitation and laughed bitterly. That's what I thought. Loveth, please, I just need to think about how to handle this. You need to think about it? Loveth's voice rose. Your ex-fiancé is moving into your house and you need to think about whether to say no? It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. Loveth grabbed her purse. I told you I didn't want this. I told you I didn't want to live in a world where your mother can just move people around like chess pieces, and here we are. Mommy, Alexander called out, his eyes wide and scared. Where are you going? Loveth's expression softened immediately. Nowhere, baby. Mommy's just frustrated. Are you mad at Mr. Min-ho again? Yes. Still? Alexander's bottom lip trembled. But I thought you were getting better. And that, right there, was the moment Loveth realized she was trapped. Because leaving would break Alexander's heart, staying would break her own, and she didn't know which was worse. The doorbell rang. All three of them froze. That's her, isn't it? Loveth said flatly. Min-ho checked his watch. She's early. Of course she is. Alexander ran to answer the door before either adult could stop him, and they heard his cheerful voice echo through the penthouse. Hello, are you here to visit? Min-ho and Loveth rushed to the entryway to find Alexander staring up at what could only be described as a Korean Barbie doll. Ji-hai Park was tall, elegant, dressed head to toe in Chanel, and holding herself like she owned the place. She looked down at Alexander with barely concealed distaste. Yes, I'm visiting. Is your mother here? Right here, Loveth said, stepping forward. Ji-hai's eyes swept over Loveth, from her work clothes to her natural hair to her comfortable flats, and the dismissal in that gaze was instant. You must be the American, Ji-hai said, her English perfect but cold. How interesting. Loveth smiled, and it was not a nice smile. And you must be the ex. How desperate. Min-ho made a choking sound. Ji-hai's perfectly made-up face tightened. I'm sorry? You should be, Loveth said sweetly. Sorry that his mother had to call you to get you into his house. That's gotta sting, needing someone's mommy to fight your battles. I was invited. By his mother, not by him, which makes you what? A house guest he didn't want. A scheme he didn't ask for. Loveth tilted her head. How does it feel knowing that even with your designer clothes and your family connections, you still can't get a man who actually wants you? The room went deadly silent. Ji-hai's face had gone white, then red. How dare you? How dare I what? Tell the truth. Loveth stepped closer, and despite being several inches apart, she somehow made Ji-hai step back. Let me make something very clear. I don't care who your family is. I don't care what arrangements were made years ago, and I definitely don't care that his mother sent you here to try to make me leave. Loveth, Min-ho tried to interject. No, let me finish. Loveth's eyes never left Ji-hee's face. Minho is mine, not because I trapped him or used him or whatever story you've been told, but because he chose me. Every single day he chooses me and my son, and that drives you crazy, doesn't it? That a single mother from Texas with no connections and no perfect pedigree somehow won the heart of the man you couldn't keep? Jihai's mouth opened and closed like a fish. So here's how this is going to go. Loveth continued, her voice deadly calm. You can stay here. Madame Jiang already arranged it, and I'm sure backing out would cause all sorts of political problems. But if you think for 1 second that you're going to come between me and Minho, you're even more delusional than I thought. She turned to Minho, who was staring at her like he'd never seen her before. I'm still mad at you, she said. We'll talk later. Then she swept past Jihai, grabbed her forgotten folder, and walked out the door, leaving 3 stunned people in her wake. Your fiancé is terrifying, Jihai said faintly. I know, Minho said, and he sounded oddly proud. Isn't she amazing? Alexander tugged on Jihai's designer bag. Miss, are you really staying here? Yes? Okay. Alexander smiled angelically. Just so you know, weird things happen in this house. Things go missing. Food gets interesting. Alarms go off at strange times. Just thought you should know. Then he skipped away, humming to himself, and Jihai looked at Minho with growing horror. Was that a threat? That, Minho said, was a warning. If you're loving Loveth's energy right now, you need to hit that subscribe button because it's about to get even better. Drop a comment telling me who you think is going to win this battle, and stick around because Alexander is about to make Jihai's life absolutely miserable in the funniest way possible. That first night was a disaster of epic proportions. Jihai had moved in with 3 Louis Vuitton suitcases, a personal assistant who took one look at the situation and immediately quit, and an attitude that made Madame Jiang look warm and fuzzy by comparison. She'd taken over the guest room, which unfortunately shared a wall with the master bedroom, and spent an hour rearranging furniture and critiquing the decor loudly enough for everyone to hear. Is beige really the best choice for an accent wall? She'd called out. It's so 2015. Loveth, who was helping Alexander with his homework in the living room, had smiled sweetly. You know what else is 2015? Chasing after your ex, but here we are. Minho had choked on his coffee. Dinner was even worse. Jihai had insisted they all eat together, to get to know each other better. And Minho, trapped between wanting to throw her out and not, wanting to cause an international incident with the Park family, had reluctantly agreed. They sat around the table like the world's most dysfunctional family. Alexander sat between Loveth and Minho, swinging his legs and eyeing Jihai with open suspicion. Jihai sat across from them, looking like she was posing for a magazine spread even while cutting her steak. So Loveth, Jihai said, taking a delicate sip of wine, Minho mentioned you work in hospitality? Guest relations, Loveth said, at the Grand Hyatt. How lovely. You must meet all sorts of interesting people. The way she said interesting made it sound like a disease. I do, Loveth agreed. Just yesterday, I helped a woman who was convinced her suite wasn't good enough. Turned out she just had unrealistic expectations and an overinflated sense of self-importance. Jihai's smile froze. Funny how that happens, Loveth continued innocently. Some people just don't understand that you can't always get what you want, no matter how much you whine about it. Minho was gripping his fork so hard his knuckles were white, and Loveth couldn't tell if he was trying not to laugh or trying not to scream. And what do you do, Miss Jihai? Alexander asked, his voice sweet as sugar. Jihai turned to him with a patronizing smile. I manage my family's art gallery. We showcase very important contemporary Korean artists. So you hang up pictures? Alexander asked. It's much more complex than that. But mostly you just hang up pictures and tell people they're good? Jihai's eye twitched. It's called curation. My mommy helps people when they're sad or scared or lost, Alexander continued, completely steamrolling over her. She makes them feel better. What do you do that makes people feel better? There was a beat of silence, and then Jihai's smile turned sharp. Well, I provide cultural enrichment. Not everyone can appreciate art, of course. It requires a certain level of sophistication. Oh, Alexander said, nodding seriously. So you help fancy people look at fancy pictures. That's nice, I guess. Loveth bit her lip to keep from laughing, and Minho had to excuse himself to check on something in the kitchen, which definitely wasn't him trying not to crack up. Minho and I used to attend gallery openings together. Ji-hai continued when Minho returned, looking at him with doe eyes that made Loveth want to throw something. Do you remember that exhibition at the Seoul Museum of Art? You said my analysis of the installation pieces was brilliant. That was 5 years ago, Minho said flatly. Was it? Time flies when you're with someone who truly understands you. Ji-hai reached across the table like she was going to touch Minho's hand. Loveth's fork hit her plate with a loud clink. Alexander, bedtime. But Mommy, I'm not. Now please. Alexander recognized that tone, the one that meant Mommy was 2 seconds from doing something. She'd have to apologize for later, and scrambled out of his chair. As Loveth led him away, she heard Ji-hai's tinkling laugh and Minho's terse, "Don't touch me," and she felt something dark and violent coil in her chest. In Alexander's room, after he was tucked in, her son looked up at her with serious eyes. "I don't like her, Mommy." "I don't like her either, baby." "Why is she here?" Loveth sighed, sitting on the edge of his bunk bed. "Because Mr. Minho's mother is trying to cause trouble. She thinks if she sends this woman here, I'll get upset and leave." "Are you going to leave?" "No," Loveth said firmly, "because I'm not going to let some fancy lady in designer clothes tell me what to do, and neither should you." Alexander's face split into a mischievous grin. "So if weird things happen to her stuff, you won't be mad?" "Alexander, I'm just asking," her son said innocently. "Hypothetically." Loveth tried to look stern. "We don't mess with people's things. Even when they're trying to steal Mr. Minho? Even then, we're better than that." "Okay, Mommy." Alexander settled into his pillow, and Loveth could practically see the wheels turning in his little head. This was going to be a disaster. Back in the master bedroom, Loveth changed in the bathroom and emerged in her most unsexy pajamas, an old t-shirt and sweatpants, to find Minho already in bed, looking exhausted. "Loveth," he started. She held up a hand. "I don't want to talk. Please, just let me." "I said I don't want to talk." She climbed into bed, turned her back to him, and closed her eyes. "She's leaving tomorrow," Minho said quietly. "I'm going to tell my mother that this isn't acceptable, that she can't just—" "You said that 2 days ago," Loveth said, her voice muffled by the pillow. "And yet here we are, with your ex-fiancé sleeping 20 feet away." "I'm handling it." "Are you? Because from where I'm lying, it looks like you're letting everyone walk all over you. Your mother, Ji-hai, everyone except the people who actually matter." "You matter," Minho said desperately. "You and Alexander are the only things that matter." "Then prove it," Loveth said. "Stop talking about what you're going to do and actually do it." She heard Minho's sharp intake of breath, felt the bed shift as he moved closer. "Don't," she warned without turning around. "I'm serious, Minho. I need space." He stopped moving, and the silence that followed was painful. "I love you," he said finally, his voice rough. "I know you don't want to hear it right now, but I need you to know. I love you so much it terrifies me." Loveth squeezed her eyes shut, fighting tears. "Good night, Loveth." She didn't say it back, and that silence between them felt like a chasm. The next morning, the chaos began in earnest. Ji-hai's expensive alarm clock went off at 4:30 a.m., blaring on repeat. And mysteriously, none of the buttons would turn it off. Her shriek of frustration woke the entire penthouse. "What is that noise?" she screamed. Minho stumbled out of the bedroom, half asleep. Loveth followed more slowly and found Alexander standing in his doorway, rubbing his eyes with the most innocent expression she'd ever seen. "What's wrong?" her son asked sweetly. "My alarm." Ji-hai appeared in the hallway in a silk robe, her hair wild, her makeup-free face showing actual human emotions for once. "It won't turn off." "Did you try unplugging it?" Alexander suggested helpfully. "Of course I tried." Ji-hai stopped, took a breath. "Yes, I tried unplugging it. It won't stop." "Weird," Alexander said, shaking his head. "Technology is so unreliable." Minho finally managed to stop the alarm by literally removing the batteries, and Ji-hai stormed back to her room, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the walls. Loveth looked down at her son. Alexander. Yes, Mommy. What did we talk about last night? Not messing with people's things, Alexander recited dutifully. I didn't mess with her things, I just set her alarm to help her wake up early. That's being helpful. Loveth tried to look stern, but the corners of her mouth were twitching. That's not helpful. That's sabotage. Is there a difference? Yes. Okay, Mommy, I'll remember that. Alexander's smile was absolutely angelic, and Loveth knew for a fact that her son would remember no such thing. Day 4 of Jihai's stay, her designer shampoo mysteriously got replaced with Alexander's strawberry-scented kids' shampoo. She didn't notice until she was blow-drying her hair and realized it smelled like a candy store. Day 5, her favorite coffee mug developed a mysterious crack that leaked all over her expensive silk blouse. Day 6, all of her shoes ended up on the balcony. All of them, in the rain. I don't understand, Jihai wailed to Minho. Why does everything keep going wrong? Minho looked at Alexander, who was sitting at the kitchen counter doing homework with the most focused expression imaginable. I have no idea, Minho said, but there was laughter in his eyes. By day 7, Jihai looked like she was about to have a breakdown. Her perfectly curated life was falling apart one designer item at a time, and she couldn't figure out why. That afternoon, Loveth came home from work to find Jihai sitting on the balcony, drinking wine at 3 p.m., mascara running down her face. Loveth paused. She should probably feel bad. Probably. But looking at this woman who'd waltzed into her home trying to steal her man, who'd been condescending and rude and entitled, Loveth felt exactly zero sympathy. Still, she wasn't heartless. You okay? She asked, stepping onto the balcony. Jihai looked up, and for the first time, she looked human instead of plastic. Do I look okay? Loveth sat down across from her. Not really, no. I've been here a week and my entire life is falling apart, Jihai said, taking a long drink of wine. My clothes are ruined. My things keep disappearing. That child looks at me like I'm the villain in his story. You kind of are, Loveth pointed out. I know. Jihai slammed her glass down. And I hate it. I hate being here. I hate trying to convince a man who clearly loves someone else to love me. I hate... She stopped, pressing her hands to her face. I hate everything about this. Loveth blinked. Then why are you here? Because my mother told me to be here. Jihai laughed bitterly. Because Madame Jiang called and said Minho was making a terrible mistake, and I could save him from himself. Because I'm almost 30, and my family is obsessed with me marrying the right kind of man. Because I'm so tired of disappointing everyone that when they told me to come here and seduce my ex-fiancé, I just did it. She looked at Loveth with red-rimmed eyes. I don't even want Minho. Not really. We have nothing in common. We never did. Our mothers arranged an engagement when we were teenagers, and I went along with it because that's what good daughters do. So why not just leave? Loveth asked. Because admitting failure to my mother is worse than actually failing, Jihai said. Because if I go back and tell her I couldn't get Minho back, she'll never let me hear the end of it. Because I'm trapped in a life I never wanted, and I don't know how to get out. Loveth stared at this woman who'd been making her life hell, and suddenly saw her clearly for the first time, not as an enemy, not as competition, but as another woman crushed under the weight of expectations. I get it, Loveth said quietly. Jihai laughed. Do you? Yeah, I do. Loveth leaned back in her chair. My whole life I've been told I'm not enough. Not smart enough, not pretty enough, not refined enough. When I moved to Korea, people looked at me like I didn't belong. When I met Minho, his mother looked at me like I was something she stepped in. She does that to everyone, Jihai muttered. But I'm still here, Loveth continued. You know why? Because I decided that what other people think doesn't matter. My mom's opinion, Madame Jiang's opinion, random strangers' opinions, none of it matters. The only opinions that matter are mine and Alexander's. And Minho's, I guess, since I'm marrying him. Jihai was quiet for a long moment. Your son really hates me, doesn't he? Oh, definitely. He's been systematically destroying your life for days. I knew it. Jihai actually smiled through her tears. The alarm clock wasn't an accident, was it? Not even a little bit. He's terrifying. He's protective, Loveth corrected, and honestly, I respect it. They sat in silence, and then Jihai said, I'm sorry for all of this, for moving in, for trying to get between you and Minho, for being me. Loveth wanted to stay mad, wanted to hold on to her righteousness, but looking at this woman who was just as trapped as Loveth had once been, maybe we should be friends instead of enemies, Jihai suggested, because honestly, Madame Jiang is the real enemy here. Loveth considered this. You know what? You're right. They clinked glasses. Loveth had grabbed a soda, and just like that, the entire dynamic shifted. Over the next few days, Minho watched in complete bewilderment as his ex-fiancé and his actual fiancé became friends. They had coffee dates together, sat on the balcony laughing about God knows what. And every time Minho tried to ask what was going on, they'd just smile mysteriously and change the subject. I don't understand women, he told his second-in-command, a man named Tae Yang who'd been with him for 15 years. No man does, boss, Tae Yang said wisely, but when they team up, run. They're not teaming up, they're just debonding? That's the same thing, and if I were you, I'd be very worried. Why? Because women who bond over shared trauma, namely dealing with difficult mothers, become unstoppable. Minho groaned. The situation came to a head when Madame Jiang called Jihai to check on her progress. How is the plan going? She asked. Jihai had put the phone on speaker. Loveth was sitting right there, painting Jihai's nails a bold red while Alexander played on his tablet nearby. Oh, it's going wonderfully, Jihai said, winking at Loveth. Minho and I have been spending so much time together. This was technically true. They'd spent time together, along with Loveth and Alexander, as a very weird, very dysfunctional family unit. Excellent, Madame Jiang said, satisfaction dripping from her voice. And the American? Oh, she's been very accommodating. I think she's starting to realize she doesn't belong here. Loveth had to stuff her fist in her mouth to keep from laughing. Good, good. Keep pushing, Jihai. Minho will see reason soon. Oh, I'm sure he will, Jihai said, barely keeping the laughter out of her voice. I'm sure. He'll see all sorts of things very clearly. After they hung up, all three of them, Loveth, Jihai, and Alexander, burst into giggles. Your future mother-in-law is diabolical, Jihai said. Tell me about it, Loveth groaned. But you know what? I think it's time we showed her exactly what happens when you underestimate women. Jihai's eyes lit up. What did you have in mind? How do you feel about a very public, very visible shopping trip? With photos? I love it. Let me call my photographer friend. Your what? Jihai grinned. Just trust me. The next day, Loveth and Jihai hit every luxury shopping district in Seoul. They tried on ridiculous outfits, laughed loudly enough to turn heads, and made sure to be seen by everyone who mattered in Seoul's social circles. Jihai's photographer friend turned out to be a society photographer whose Instagram account was followed by half of Seoul's elite. By evening, photos of Minho's fiancés shopping together were all over social media. The captions ranged from unexpected friendship alert to plot twist of the century to when your ex and your current partner become besties. Minho's phone started ringing off the hook. He came home that evening looking shell-shocked. What did you two do? Loveth and Jihai were on the couch in face masks, watching K-dramas and eating popcorn. They looked up innocently. Shopping, Loveth said. Why? My mother has called me 8 times. She's losing her mind. Is she? Jihai examined her nails. That's unfortunate. She's demanding to know what's going on, why you two are suddenly best friends, and whether I've lost complete control of my life. Have you? Loveth asked sweetly. Minho stared at them, and then he started laughing. Deep, genuine laughter that made his whole body shake. You two are absolutely evil, he said. We prefer strategic, Loveth corrected. I'm so confused right now, Minho admitted, running a hand through his hair. But also kind of impressed, and definitely terrified. Good, both women said in unison. Alexander wandered in from his room, took one look at the scene, and nodded approvingly. This is much better. Are we keeping Miss Jihai? Just until I find my own place, Jihai said, ruffling his hair. But your mom and I are friends now. Good, Alexander said seriously, and I think we should have a party. A party? Minho raised an eyebrow. Yeah, to celebrate that the mean grandma's plan didn't work and Mommy isn't mad anymore, and Miss Ji-hai found her own boyfriend. Wait, what? Loveth and Minho said in unison. She met a guy at the coffee shop yesterday, Alexander said matter-of-factly. He has nice hair, she showed me pictures. Loveth made a mental note to get all the details from Ji-hai later. Does that mean you'll stop trying to steal Mr. Minho? I was never really trying to steal him, Ji-hai admitted. I was just doing what I was told, but I'm done with that now. Alexander considered this seriously. Okay, then I'll stop putting bugs in your stuff. That was you, Ji-hai shrieked, but she was laughing. Obviously, Alexander said. Like this should have been clear all along. That night, after Alexander was asleep and Ji-hai had retreated to her room, Loveth and Minho finally had a real conversation. They sat on the balcony, Seoul glittering below them, and for the first time in 2 weeks, Loveth didn't immediately turn away when Minho tried to talk. I'm sorry, he said quietly. For all of it. For not protecting you better from my mother. For hesitating when Ji-hai showed up. For making you feel like you had to handle everything alone. You should be sorry, Loveth said, but her voice was softer now. Do you have any idea how hard these past 2 weeks have been? Sleeping next to you and pretending I don't love you? Watching you try so hard to fix things and not being able to tell you it's working? It's working? Minho's voice was hopeful. A little, Loveth admitted. Ji-hai helped actually. Seeing that she was just as trapped by family expectations as I felt, it made me realize we're all just trying to survive your mother's manipulation. Speaking of which, Minho said, pulling out his phone. I need to show you something. He pulled up an email and handed her the phone. Loveth read it, her eyes getting wider with each line. It was an email to Madame Jang, carbon copied to what looked like the entire family organization, formally announcing Minho's engagement to Loveth and his intention to adopt Alexander. It laid out, in excruciating detail, that any interference in his personal life would be considered a direct challenge to his authority, and it was dated a week ago. You sent this a week ago? Loveth asked. The day after Ji-hai arrived, I was just waiting for the right moment to tell you. Minho took her hand. I meant what I said that night at my mother's house. You and Alexander are my family, and I'm done letting anyone make you feel otherwise. Loveth felt tears burning her eyes. Minho, I'm not finished, he said. I've also set up a meeting with my mother, tomorrow, at a cafe, neutral ground, and I want you there. What? Why? Because it's time she heard from you directly. Time she understood that you're not going anywhere, that I'm not going anywhere, that this is happening whether she likes it or not. Loveth looked at this man who'd spent 2 weeks sleeping next to her in silence, who'd let her freeze him out without complaint, who'd been working behind the scenes to protect her while she'd been too angry to see it. I'm still mad at you, she said. I know. But I'm also still in love with you. Minho's face broke into the first real smile she'd seen in weeks. Yeah. Loveth leaned in and kissed him, soft and sweet and full of everything she'd been holding back. Just don't ever let your mother move random women into our house again. Deal, Minho said against her lips, although I have to say, this particular random woman turned out to be pretty great. She did, didn't she? Loveth pulled back smiling. Who knew your ex-fiancé would end up being my friend? Not me, Minho admitted, but I'm learning not to underestimate women, especially when they team up. Smart man. Loveth moved closer, letting Minho's arm wrap around her shoulders, his fingers tracing absent patterns on her skin. I should have protected you better, Minho said quietly. From my mother, from Ji-hai, from all of it. You can't protect me from everything, Loveth said, but you can stand beside me when things get hard. You can choose me, loudly and publicly, even when it's difficult. I'll choose you every time, Minho promised. Even when my mother loses her mind, even when my entire organization questions my judgment, every single time. Good, Loveth said, snuggling closer, because you're stuck. With me now. Me and my mischievous son who puts bugs in people's food. Minho laughed. That kid is going to give me gray hair. You love him. I really do, Minho said softly. I love both of you. So much it terrifies me sometimes. Good. Loveth said again. Love should be a little terrifying, keeps it interesting. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and then Minho said, "So, am I forgiven?" "You're getting there," Loveth said. "Keep trying." "I plan to," Minho promised, pulling her close, "for the rest of my life." And speaking of which, he dropped to one knee right there on the balcony, pulling out the ring box he'd been carrying for weeks, waiting for the right moment. "Alexander," he called. The boy came running from his room. "Yeah? Come here, buddy. I need your help with something." Alexander ran over and Minho took his hand, placing it on the ring box. "I want to ask your mom something very important. Will you help me?" Alexander's eyes went wide. "Are you going to ask her to marry you again?" "Yes. Yes." Alexander pumped his fist in the air. "I'll be the best helper ever." Together they opened the box, revealing a stunning diamond ring that caught the light and made Loveth's breath catch. "Loveth Bryan," Minho said, his voice steady and sure. "Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that you made the right choice? Will you let me be Alexander's father and your partner, and the man who gets to wake up next to you every single day?" "Say yes, Mommy," Alexander stage whispered. "I already told him you would." Loveth laughed through her tears, looking at these two people who'd somehow become her entire world, a mafia boss with a soft heart and a 6-year-old with the courage of a lion. Because love, she was learning, was braver than fear, and family wasn't about blood or tradition or fitting into someone else's idea of belonging. Family was this, a man who chose her every day, a son who defended her without hesitation, and maybe, just maybe, a mother-in-law who was learning that being strong didn't mean being cruel. The next afternoon, Loveth walked into Cafe Onion feeling like a woman going into battle. But this time, she wasn't alone. Jihai had offered to come for moral support and was sitting at a nearby table pretending to read a magazine while actually ready to intervene if things got ugly. And Minho was right beside her, his hand warm in hers. Madame Yang sat in her usual corner booth, looking perfectly composed except for the tightness around her eyes. "You brought her," she said to Minho, disapproval dripping from every word. "She's my fiancée," Minho said firmly. "Where I go, she goes." They sat down, and for a long moment nobody spoke. Finally, Madame Jiang turned her sharp gaze to Loveth. "I underestimated you." "Yes," Loveth said. "You did." Jihai was supposed to remind Minho of what a proper match looks like. Instead, she became your... Madame Jiang struggled with the word. "Friend?" "She did," Loveth confirmed. "Turns out we have a lot in common." "Such as?" "Such as dealing with controlling mothers who think they know what's best for their children." Loveth leaned forward. "Here's what I think happened. You spent your whole life being strong because that's how you survived. You fought for your place, became hard because soft meant weak, but you forgot that strength can look different. That love can be powerful, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let go." Madame Jiang's jaw tightened. "You don't know anything about my life." "I know what it's like to be judged for where you came from," Loveth said quietly. "I know what it's like to fight for everything you have. I know what it's like to be told you don't belong somewhere, even though you know you do. So yeah, I think I understand more than you think." There was a long silence, and then Madame Yang said, "You're not what I wanted for Minho." "I know, but I'm what he chose, and more importantly, I'm what makes him happy." Loveth squeezed Minho's hand. "I'm not here to replace you or push you out of his life, but I'm also not going anywhere. So you have a choice. You can keep fighting this and lose your son, or you can accept it and gain a daughter-in-law and a grandson who might actually like you if you give them a chance." "I don't know how to do that," Madame Jiang admitted, and for the first time, she looked old, tired. "I've been one way for so long." "Then learn," Loveth said simply. "Start small. Come to dinner. Talk to Alexander like he's a person, not a problem. Acknowledge that maybe your son knows what he's doing." Minho spoke up for the first time. "I'm marrying Loveth in 3 months. I'm adopting Alexander." "This is happening, Mother. The only question is whether you'll be part of it." Madame Jiang looked between them, and something complicated crossed her face. 3 months? 3 months, Minho confirmed. "That's very soon." "We've waited long enough," Minho said firmly. There was another long pause, and then Madame Jiang did something neither of them expected. She smiled, Not warmly, but not cruelly either. "You remind me of someone," she said finally. "My mother. She was from Busan, from nothing. When she married my father, his family treated her exactly the way I treated you. Like she was dirt they'd tracked into their clean house." Loveth blinked. She hadn't expected this. "She took it for years," Madame Jiang continued. "The insults, the dismissal, the constant reminder that she didn't belong. And then one day, she'd had enough. She stood up to my grandmother in front of the entire family and told her that cruelty dressed up as tradition was still just cruelty." "What happened?" Loveth asked. "My grandmother never spoke to her again, but my mother didn't care. She'd found her voice and she never lost it again." Madame Jiang's expression shifted into something complicated. "I swore when I married into power that I would never be weak like that. Never let anyone make me feel small. I became hard because I thought that's what survival looked like." "And now?" Loveth asked carefully. "Now my son looks at me like I'm a stranger. Now a 6-year-old child had the courage to say what no one else would. And now I'm sitting in a cafe I would never normally visit, trying to figure out how to fix what I broke." Loveth sat back, completely thrown. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Min-ho loves you," Madame Jiang said bluntly. "And I've seen my son with many women over the years. Women who wanted his money, his power, his name. But I've never seen him look at someone the way he looks at you. Like you're the only thing in the room that matters." She paused, and for the first time, Loveth saw something human in those cold eyes. "And because your son did what I should have done 30 years ago," Madame Jiang continued. "He defended someone he loves without caring about the consequences. That kind of bravery is rare, even in my world, especially in my world." Min-ho had stayed mostly quiet, letting the two women navigate this conversation, but his hand never left Loveth's. When they finally prepared to leave, Madame Jiang paused. "I'd like to come to dinner once a week if you'll allow it." Loveth glanced at Min-ho, who nodded almost imperceptibly. She turned back to Madame Jiang. "Once a week, but the first time you insult me or Alexander, that's it, we're done." "I understand," Madame Jiang said quietly, "and I'll try, but I'm not promising miracles." "Nobody's asking for miracles," Loveth said. "Just basic human decency." "Don't push your luck," Madame Jiang warned, but there was almost humor in her voice. As they left the cafe, Loveth felt lighter than she had in months. It wasn't perfect. It probably would never be perfect. But it was a start. Ji-hai was waiting outside and she raised her eyebrows questioningly. "We have weekly dinners now," Loveth said. "Voluntarily?" "Apparently." "You're braver than me," Ji-hai said with a laugh. 3 months later, on a perfect spring day, Loveth stood in a small chapel in Seoul, wearing a dress that made her feel like royalty. Ji-hai was there as a bridesmaid, having become one of Loveth's closest friends despite the weird way they'd met. "You look stunning," Ji-hai said, stepping back to admire her work. "I'm nervous," Loveth admitted. "Don't be. Min-ho is out there looking like he might actually cry, and Alexander has been practicing his ring-bearer walk for weeks. It's going to be perfect." "Is your boyfriend here?" Ji-hai blushed. "His name is Sung Min, and yes, he's here. My mother is losing her mind about it, which makes it even better." "Good for you," Loveth said, squeezing her hand. Alexander was the ring-bearer, and he took his job so seriously that he walked at approximately 1 mile per hour, making sure every step was perfect. The guests were trying so hard not to laugh. Min-ho stood at the altar looking like Loveth was the only person in the world, and when she walked down the aisle, his eyes got suspiciously shiny. And in the front row, wearing traditional hanbok and looking almost uncomfortable with the softness in her expression, sat Madame Jiang Su-jin. She caught Loveth's eye and gave the smallest nod. It wasn't much, but it was enough, because some victories weren't won in a day. Some battles took time, patience, and the kind of courage that came from loving someone enough to keep trying. As Min-ho took her hand and Alexander beamed up at both of them, Loveth realized something important. She'd been right to be afraid, right to protect herself and Alexander, right to demand respect and dignity, but she'd also been right to take the chance, to fight for this, to believe that love could be bigger than fear, stronger than tradition, braver than doubt. "Ready?" Min-ho whispered, as the ceremony began. "Ready," Loveth whispered back. And together, with Alexander between them and a future full of chaos and love, and probably more schemes from Madame Young, but also weekly dinners where they were slowly, painfully becoming a real family, they said, "I do." Because this was their family now. Messy, imperfect, absolutely worth everything. If this story made you laugh, warmed your heart, or had you rooting for Loveth the whole way through, then smash that subscribe button right now. Drop a comment and tell me what you think family dinners with Madame Jang are going to look like, because I have a feeling Alexander is going to keep everyone on their toes. And also, he's going to give Minho a serious run for his money. Before you go, check out the next video where we explore what happens when Alexander accidentally tells his entire class that his new dad makes bad people disappear for a living. Trust me, you do not want to miss that chaos. See you in the next story.